My name is Oscar Reynolds, and I never thought I would live to tell you this. Imagine begging your own son to call an ambulance while your chest burned like fire, only to hear him calmly say, "No, Dad. Maybe it's for the best." That's when I realized the boy I had raised, the child I had sacrificed everything for, no longer saw me as his father. He saw me as an obstacle standing in the way of a $300,000 house. But 3 days later, what he walked into made him scream, and it wasn't death waiting for me, it was justice. Before I begin, I want to ask, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories like this one. I had always believed that coming home from the hospital would be a moment of relief, a return to familiar walls that carried the warmth of my late wife's touch. Instead, the first step into my own house felt like walking into a stranger's home. My name is Oscar Reynolds, and that day I learned how cold blood ties can become. The door creaked in its usual way, but nothing else felt right. My hands shook as I placed my suitcase on the floor, my discharge papers still in my coat pocket. The living room looked pristine, too pristine. Gone were the photo frames that once lined the mantelpiece, pictures of Sarah smiling on our anniversary, Ethan holding his first baseball glove, family vacations that had defined my life. In their place were new books, arranged neatly by color like props in someone else's life. Even Sarah's old lamp, bought at a garage sale and cherished for decades, had disappeared. "Where are my things?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. Celeste emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands with a towel, wearing that polite smile that never touched her eyes. "We were just cleaning up, Oscar. It was getting so cluttered." Cluttered. That single word cut deeper than any surgical scar. Those were my memories. My life. Ethan, seated in my chair, the same chair where I used to read the newspaper every morning, barely looked up from his laptop. "Yeah, Dad, I see you're back." His tone was flat dismissive, as if I were an interruption to his day. I scanned the room again, trying to hold back the ache in my chest that had nothing to do with surgery. 37 years in this house, and suddenly I was the outsider. I moved toward the garage, hoping to find some of my belongings untouched. What I found instead were boxes stacked high, each labeled in Celeste's neat handwriting. Oscar's items. Storage. Storage. As if I were already gone. Tools I had used for decades, Sarah's handwritten recipe cards, photo albums, all sealed away. My hands trembled as I opened one box and touched the faded leather cover of our family album. I felt like a ghost peering into the remnants of his own life. "Why are my things in boxes?" I demanded, my voice breaking. Ethan finally stood in the garage doorway, arms crossed, wearing my son's face, but not his heart. "Dad, we thought you'd be more comfortable with a different arrangement." A different arrangement. My throat tightened. "This is my house, son." Ethan's eyes hardened. "Actually, Dad, we've been thinking about the future. You're not getting any younger. The stairs are dangerous for someone in your condition." My condition. The one he never once asked about during my 2 weeks in the hospital. Not a visit, not a phone call. The words hung between us like poison. For the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to be erased while still breathing. Tell me, have you ever come home from the hospital expecting comfort, only to discover that your family had already written you out of your own life? The first night back in my own bed should have brought peace. Instead, it felt like lying in a stranger's coffin. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier. I tried to ignore the unease, convincing myself it was only the awkwardness of returning after weeks in a hospital. But deep down, I sensed something darker. Morning light filtered through the blinds when the pain struck sharp, unrelenting pressure in my chest, radiating down my arm. I had been warned about this by Dr. Simmons. "If you feel sudden heaviness, call an ambulance immediately," she had said. My heart hammered wildly, sweat dripping down my temples. I reached for the phone on the dresser, but every step was agony, as if each beat might be my last. "Ethan," I croaked, leaning against the wall for support. "Ethan, help me," the sound of the coffee machine whirred downstairs, followed by the low murmur of the television. Normal sounds for a normal morning if your father wasn't gasping for air at the top of the stairs. My voice rose, torn from the depths of my chest. "Ethan, please call an ambulance." Finally, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. He reached the top of the stairs, his hair still mussed from sleep, eyes calm, as if nothing were wrong. "What is it, Dad? I can't breathe." "Call 911, please." He stepped into the room, glanced at the sweat soaking through my shirt, the pale face staring back from the mirror. His expression didn't change. He crossed the floor casually, as though checking a broken faucet. His gaze flickered to my phone on the dresser. Then he picked it up, slipped it into his pocket, and said words that froze me colder than the chest pain ever could. "No, Dad. I won't call." The air left my lungs in disbelief. "What are you saying, I could die?" He looked at me the way a banker looks at numbers on a page. Maybe that would be for the best. It was as if ice water had been poured directly into my veins. My knees buckled, and I slumped against the wall, struggling to comprehend. "You're my son. You're old. You're sick. This house is worth $300,000, and Celeste and I have plans. You're a burden. A burden." The word hit harder than the heart attack itself. For decades I had worked, saved, sacrificed all so my son would never know hunger, never know fear. And now the boy I had taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose college I had paid for, stood before me calmly waiting for me to collapse and solve all his problems. He walked to the doorway and with deliberate slowness turned the lock. Click. "Ethan." I pounded weakly against the door with what strength I had left. "Open this door. What are you doing?" His footsteps retreated back to his coffee, his laptop, his future without me. That was the moment I understood my son had sentenced me not with violence, but with indifference. "Tell me, if you were locked away during a heart emergency by your own child, would you still believe blood is thicker than water?" The silence after Ethan's footsteps faded was louder than any noise I'd ever heard. No shouts, no panic, no rush to help, just the steady hum of the coffee maker downstairs, as if nothing extraordinary was happening. My chest throbbed like someone pressing a brick against it, each breath shallow and sharp. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the carpet, Sarah's carpet, the one she had chosen years ago. My palm pressed against the fibers as though her touch might somehow give me strength. "Ethan," I whispered again, though I already knew no answer would come. A wave of nausea hit, and my vision narrowed, the edges dimming. I forced myself to think of Dr. Simmons's warning, "If the pain spreads, don't wait. Call immediately." But there was no phone now, no ambulance, no wife to hold my hand. All I had was the betrayal of the son who had just locked me in to die. I thought back to when Ethan was 7, crying over a spider he had stepped on by accident. He had clung to me, horrified by the idea of taking life, his little body shaking in my arms. That tender-hearted boy was gone. In his place stood a man who now calculated my death with the same detachment he once feared killing an insect. For a moment, despair threatened to drown me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had become a burden. Old, sick, needing care that no one wanted to give. The thought crept into my mind, like a shadow whispering that surrender would be easier than fighting. But then I saw her face, Sarah, my wife, smiling as she stirred sauce in our kitchen, humming her favorite tune. She had fought for every ounce of life she had until the cancer finally took her. And she had always told me, "Oscar, you're stronger than you think. Don't you dare give up." Her words ignited something in me. If Ethan thought I would die quietly, he didn't know me. I'd survived 2 wars, the loss of my wife, and now a heart surgery that should have ended me. I wasn't going to let my own son write the final chapter of my life. I crawled across the floor, every movement like dragging chains, until I reached the window. My neighbor Hal's house stood across the street, his tidy garden catching the morning sun. Hal, who waved to me every day, who asked about my recovery just last week. If I could reach him, there was hope. The window latch was stiff, painted shut from years of disuse. My fingers shook violently as I pried at it, praying for strength. With a rusty squeal, it gave way, and the fresh air rushed against my face like salvation. "Hal," I croaked, my throat raw. "Help me." He looked up from his garden, his expression changing instantly from calm to alarm. Dropping his trowel, he rushed toward his door. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't done yet. "So tell me, would you fight with every last ounce of strength, even if your own child wanted you gone?" When Hal looked up at me from his garden, his face pale with shock, I felt the first spark of hope I'd had since this nightmare began. My voice was weak, barely a rasp, but desperation sharpened it. "Hal, call an ambulance, please." He dropped his gardening gloves and jogged to his front door with a swiftness I hadn't seen in years. Through the blur of dizziness, I watched him disappear inside, and within moments, he was framed in his kitchen window, phone pressed to his ear. He was gesturing urgently, his free hand slicing through the air as if to push the ambulance faster. Relief poured into me like cool water. I wasn't alone anymore. But hope came hand in hand with fear. My eyes darted to the hallway beyond my locked door. What if Ethan realized what I had done? What if he stormed in before help arrived? My body trembled, not just from the pain, but from the knowledge that I was defying his plan. The sound of footsteps confirmed my fear. Heavy, deliberate, ascending the stairs. Each creak was like a countdown to disaster. My heart, already struggling, pounded harder, every beat threatening to tear the stitches inside my chest. The lock rattled, then the door burst open so violently it slammed against the wall. Ethan filled the doorway, his face twisted in rage, his calm mask stripped away. "What did you do, old man?" he hissed, crossing the room in 3 strides. I scrambled backward, clutching the edge of the bed. "I asked Hal for help." I needed his hands gripped my shoulders with a strength I hadn't expected. Fingers pressed into my surgical scar, sending a jolt of pain that made me cry out. His eyes were wild, no longer my son's, but a stranger's. "Listen to me. If you tell anyone about this, I'll make your life hell." I gasped, staring at the boy I had raised, now a man consumed by greed. "You're insane. You're my son." His lips curled into a sneer. "I'm your son who's waited too long for what should already be mine. Do you know what it's like watching you cling to life while Celeste and I scrape by? We're prisoners in this house, waiting for you to finally do us all a favor." The words struck harder than his grip. Prisoners in the very home I had built with my own 2 hands. My heart throbbed, but fury steadied my voice. "This is your home. I never asked for rent. Never." He shoved me onto the bed towering over me. "Because you wanted us dependent. Trapped. Well, guess what? I found a way out." His gaze flicked toward the window, realization dawning. "Who did you call? What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth," I whispered. "That I'm dying and my son won't save me." His face drained of color, panic creeping beneath the rage. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Tell me, how would you feel if the child you loved confessed that your death was their freedom? The shriek of sirens cut through the morning air like a blade. For me, it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. For Ethan, it was the tolling of a bell he couldn't silence. His head snapped toward the window, eyes narrowing at the flashing red lights turning onto our street. "You lying old fool," he muttered, pacing like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I forced myself upright, clutching the nightstand for balance. I saved myself, something you refused to do. He turned on me, jaw tight, but before he could speak, the front doorbell rang, followed by urgent knocks. 2 paramedics' voices echoed from below, brisk and professional. "Emergency response. Where's the patient?" Ethan straightened his shirt, smoothed his hair, and shot me a look so cold it froze my spine. "Remember," he whispered, "you got confused. The door was never locked. You panicked." He slipped on the mask of the dutiful son, then hurried downstairs. Through the open window, I saw him intercept the paramedics at the curb. His voice was calm, almost pleasant. "There's been a mistake. My father's been confused since his surgery. Sometimes he imagines emergencies that aren't real." The female paramedic wasn't convinced. She tilted her head toward the house. "We received a report of cardiac distress and possible entrapment. We need to see him now." "That won't be necessary," Ethan insisted, flashing that polished smile he used at work. "He's fine." Rage and fear gave me strength. I leaned out the window, my voice tearing through the air. "Help me, I'm upstairs. Chest pain, I'm locked in." Both paramedics froze, their eyes snapping upward to where I clung to the sill. The younger one called back, "Sir, can you hold on? We're coming up." Ethan's smile faltered, panic breaking through his act. "He gets confused," he repeated, but his words were drowned out by the authority in the paramedic's tone. "Unlock the door immediately, or we'll call police backup for suspected elder abuse." The phrase landed like a hammer blow. Elder abuse. Ethan flinched, shoulders stiff, caught between rage and fear. For a long second, he didn't move. Then the male paramedic lifted his radio. "Dispatch, possible obstruction here, requesting police assistance." That broke Ethan's paralysis. He bolted inside, keys jangling, and stomped up the stairs. When the lock finally clicked and the door swung open, he plastered on a look of false concern. "Dad, the paramedics are here to check on you. Let's not cause a scene." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because moments later, the paramedics were at my side, their eyes scanning my sweat-drenched face, my trembling hands, the fear still etched in every line of me. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Sarah Chen. This is Mike Rodriguez. We're here to help," the woman said, gently lowering her bag beside me. The name Sarah, my wife's name, felt like a sign from above. And as they fitted the oxygen mask over my face, I realized Ethan had just lost control of the story. "So let me ask you, what would you do if strangers believed your truth more than your own family did?" The ambulance lights painted the walls of my bedroom red as they rushed me to the hospital. Every bump in the road pressed against my chest like a hammer. But I clung to the oxygen mask and the calm voices of the paramedics. They weren't just saving my life. They were proving I wasn't crazy. My son wanted me gone, but I was still here. 2 days passed in a blur of IV drips, steady beeping monitors, and the antiseptic smell of survival. Nurses checked my vitals with genuine care, a stark contrast to the indifference I'd left behind at home. I kept replaying Ethan's words in my mind. Maybe that would be for the best. Each repetition carved deeper into me, not just as a father, but as a man who had built his life around family. Dr. Laura Simmons visited on the 3rd morning. She was brisk but kind, Her gray-streaked hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with experience. "Oscar, you're lucky," she said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "Another hour and the damage could have been irreversible. Someone called at the right time." "Not my son," I murmured, bitterness seeping through before I could stop it. She studied me carefully. "The paramedics mentioned unusual circumstances. A locked door, a delay in access." I met her gaze, weighing my words. I could tell her everything right then, the betrayal, the cold calculation, but part of me hesitated. If I spoke too soon, the story would collapse under the weight of disbelief. People trusted men like Ethan, clean-cut, educated, polite. They rarely believed old men with weak hearts and heavy accusations. "It was a misunderstanding," I said finally. "Stress at home. Nothing more." Her expression didn't change, but I saw the doubt in her eyes. She wasn't convinced, but she let it go, making a note in my chart. That night, while the ward settled into hushed whispers and dim lights, I stared at the ceiling tiles and came to a decision. I couldn't rely on pity or on anyone else to believe me. If I wanted justice, I'd have to fight for it myself. Not with shouting, not with fists, but with patience and proof. I remembered an old digital recorder tucked away in my dresser at home. I had bought it years ago to capture Sarah's stories for the grandchildren we never had. I smiled bitterly at the irony those same recordings might now capture the truth about my son. The more I thought about it, the clearer my plan became. Ethan thought he had silenced me by locking that door. He thought old age made me powerless. But he underestimated what experience teaches silence can be sharper than a blade when used wisely. By the time morning came, my resolve was steady. I would go home not as a helpless patient, but as a man with a mission. The next time Ethan tried to bury me, I'd make sure the world heard his shovel hit the dirt. "Tell me, if your own blood betrayed you, would you stay silent? Or would you build a case that no one could deny?" The hospital discharged me with a small bag of medication and instructions to take it easy. No stress, no heavy lifting. Dr. Simmons had said, though she had no idea the heaviest weight I carried was the knowledge of what Ethan had done. The taxi ride home was quiet. The driver talked about baseball, but I barely heard him. My mind was on the small silver recorder waiting in my dresser. Stepping through my front door this time, I didn't look for warmth or welcome. I looked for evidence. The furniture had been neatly returned to its place, as if my weeks in the hospital had never happened. Family pictures reappeared on the mantel. Sarah's lamp stood in its usual corner, and the clutter of Oscar's items, storage, had been unpacked. A cover-up. They were trying to erase the signs of their betrayal. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step measured, and went directly to my bedroom. There it was, buried under old sweaters in the bottom drawer, the digital recorder I had bought years ago for Sarah. My hands shook slightly as I switched it on. The small red light blinked alive, and with it, a new chapter of my plan began. That evening, Ethan returned from work in his crisp shirt and tie, carrying himself with the same air of confidence he had worn since boyhood. "Dad," he said smoothly, "you're home early. How are you feeling, Stable?" I answered, keeping my voice calm. "The doctor says I'm fine." I paused, then added, "But I've been thinking about the future." That word caught his attention. He froze, eyes narrowing, then forced a polite smile. "Oh, and what do you mean by that?" I leaned back in my chair, the recorder hidden in my shirt pocket, capturing every word. This house. The inheritance. What happens when I'm gone? I imagine you've thought about it too. His mask slipped for a fraction of a second. The corner of his mouth tightened. His eyes flickered with impatience. Then almost too casually he said, "Of course I've thought about it. Everyone does, Dad. But you shouldn't worry about things like that. Just rest. The tone carried more than concern. It carried the weight of calculation. I pressed gently as if curious. Do you ever feel like waiting is hard? That got him. His jaw clenched. Hard, you have no idea. Do you know what it's like to be stuck in this house, waiting for your father to finally let go? You should have gone last time. It would have been easier for everyone. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from triumph. The recorder caught every syllable. His greed, his resentment, his impatience, it was all there sealed in digital memory. I kept my face neutral, nodding slightly, as if I understood. I see. Inside, I felt the scales of justice begin to tip. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the victim, I was the hunter. So I ask you, if you had proof that your own child wished you dead, would you keep it hidden, or would you use it as a weapon for justice? 3 days after my return from the hospital, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a crime scene waiting for an investigator. Every corner whispered with memories, but instead of comfort, they served as reminders of betrayal. The mantel once held photos of family. Now it held proof of how quickly they could be erased. The kitchen smelled of Celeste's cooking, but every aroma was tainted with the knowledge she had stood silently while Ethan plotted my end. I walked through the rooms, slowly noting details like a detective. My chest still ached, but it was a manageable ache now, a reminder that I was alive, and being alive meant I had choices. Each step I took was deliberate, not of a frail man, but of one preparing for battle. Upstairs in the quiet of my bedroom, I replayed Ethan's voice from the recorder. You should have gone last time. It would have been easier for everyone. Hearing it again made my blood run cold, but it also fueled me. That little device in my pocket was my sword, sharper than any blade, stronger than any fist. But one recording wasn't enough. People like Ethan were slick calculating. They could spin a story, make a lie look like truth. I needed a confession so undeniable that even the most skeptical officer couldn't dismiss it. And more than that, I needed witnesses. I thought about Hal, the neighbor who had saved me by simply listening. His call had brought the ambulance. If not for him, I'd be a memory instead of a man plotting justice. But I couldn't burden Hal with the full weight of what I was planning. This had to be airtight, official, carried out in front of those sworn to uphold the law. At 3:30 that afternoon, I dialed the Arlington Heights Police Department. My hand trembled not from weakness, but from the enormity of what I was about to do. My name is Oscar Reynolds, I told the operator, my voice steady. I need to report a case of elder abuse, attempted murder, and false imprisonment. The silence on the line lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. Then the operator's voice sharpened. Sir, when did this occur? June 11th, I replied. I have medical documentation, and I can provide witness testimony from paramedics. But more importantly, I will have a recorded confession by tonight. The operator hesitated. Are you in immediate danger right now? Not immediate, I said. But if you send officers at 7:30 this evening, you'll see a crime unfold in real time. My heart thudded as I hung up. Too much detail would make me sound rehearsed. Too little and they might not come. Timing was everything. I placed the recorder back in my shirt pocket and tested its range, pacing around the room, speaking softly, then loudly, making sure every word carried. By the time Ethan came home, I would be ready. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about survival, dignity, and justice. So let me ask you, if you had one chance to catch a traitor red-handed, would you risk everything for that moment? By the time Ethan's sedan pulled into the driveway that evening, my plan was set. I had rehearsed every word, every expression, every pause. The recorder rested against my chest, its tiny red light hidden but glowing like a beacon of truth. Tonight, I wouldn't simply survive, I would expose him. The front door squeaked open, and Ethan stepped inside with his usual air of control. "Dad," he said smoothly, loosening his tie, "you're up late. Shouldn't you be resting?" I stayed seated in my chair, the one he had claimed while I was in the hospital. My hands folded calmly in my lap, though my heart beat hard enough to shake my ribs. I've had plenty of rest. Now I'm thinking about the future. That word future always made him twitch. His smile tightened. What about the future? I leaned forward slightly. This house, the inheritance, $300,000 give or take. I imagine you've done the math. He blinked, caught off guard. For a second the mask slipped, and I saw the frustration simmer beneath his polished exterior. "Dad, you shouldn't worry about money. Just focus on your health." I tilted my head, letting silence stretch, forcing him to fill it. "Waiting must be difficult," I said quietly. That cracked him. His jaw clenched, his eyes hardened. "Difficult? You have no idea. Do you know what it's like to watch you cling to life while Celeste and I live like prisoners here? You should have gone last time. It would have been easier for everyone." His voice rose, anger spilling through the cracks of his performance. I sat motionless, letting every syllable sink into the recorder. My pulse quickened, not from fear this time, but from victory. I kept my voice calm, almost curious. "So you've been waiting for me to die?" He barked a bitter laugh. "Don't act surprised. What did you expect? You're old weak holding on to a house that could change our lives. And yes, I'm tired of waiting. You were supposed to leave us something, but instead you cling to it like a miser." I let the silence linger again. Then I asked the question I knew would push him over the edge. "And if I don't die soon enough for you?" His face darkened, his fists tightening at his sides. "Then maybe I'll make sure you don't keep holding us back." The words exploded in the room, undeniable raw. For a moment, even he seemed shocked by his own honesty. I sat back, my expression steady. Inside, I felt the weight of the recorder pressing against my chest like armor. I had what I needed. He mistook my calm for weakness and leaned closer, his voice a hiss. "Don't you dare repeat this to anyone, old man. You'll regret it." I met his gaze evenly. "We'll see." And at that very moment I heard it, the low rumble of a police cruiser turning onto our street. "So tell me, if you had just captured the truth in your enemy's own words, would you reveal it immediately, or wait for the perfect moment to strike?" Through the window, I saw the slow crawl of headlights sweeping across the lawn. My chest tightened, not from pain this time, but from anticipation. Right on schedule. A police cruiser rolled to a stop, its presence quiet but commanding. Ethan noticed too. His head snapped toward the window, panic flickering across his face. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice sharp with fear. I folded my hands calmly in my lap, the recorder still tucked against my chest. I made sure the truth would be heard. The doorbell rang, followed by 3 deliberate knocks. That sound shattered Ethan's composure. He darted to the hallway, running a hand through his hair, adjusting his shirt, rehearsing a mask of concern. "Stay here," he ordered, as if I were still under his control. But control had already slipped through his fingers. From my chair I heard the front door open, and a woman's voice, firm and professional. "Good evening, Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, Arlington Heights Police. This is Officer Patel. We received a call regarding possible elder abuse." Ethan chuckled nervously. "There's been a misunderstanding. My father, he gets confused. Surgery, medications. Sometimes he imagines things." I rose slowly, steadying myself against the arm of the chair. My knees trembled, but my voice was strong as I called out, "I'm here upstairs, and I am not confused." The officer's footsteps moved toward the stairs. Ethan appeared again in the doorway, his face pale and tight. "Dad, you're making this worse. Don't embarrass yourself." Sergeant Gonzalez stepped into view behind him, her eyes sharp, taking in everything, the sweat on my face, the tension in Ethan's posture, the way he positioned himself like a gatekeeper. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her tone respectful, "are you able to tell us what happened?" I pulled the small silver recorder from my pocket and held it up, the red light still blinking. "Yes, Sergeant. I have a confession." Ethan lunged forward. "That's nothing. He provoked me. Stand back." Sir Officer Patel, cut in his hand, hovering near his belt. Ethan froze. With deliberate calm, I pressed play. The living room filled with Ethan's own voice, harsh and unmistakable. "You should have gone last time. It would have been easier for everyone. Maybe I'll make sure you don't keep holding us back." The room went silent except for the damning words echoing back at their owner. Ethan's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to explain, but no words came. Sergeant Gonzalez's expression hardened. "Mr. Reynolds, thank you. That's more than enough." She turned to Ethan. "Sir, you're under investigation for elder abuse and attempted harm. You'll need to come with us." Ethan looked at me, his eyes burning with betrayal, but I saw something else too, fear. For the first time, he was the one trapped, not me. And in that moment, I knew justice had finally stepped through the front door of my house. "So tell me, if you had the chance to confront your betrayer with their own words, would you press play?" The night after Ethan was questioned by the police, the house no longer echoed with silence, it trembled with tension. I could hear him pacing downstairs, his steps uneven, his voice low, as he argued with Celeste behind closed doors. Though the officers had left after taking statements, their warning hung in the air, "We'll be in touch. Don't leave town." Ethan had avoided handcuffs that night, but the mask he wore so well had cracked wide open. When he finally came upstairs, he didn't knock. He barged into my room, his face flushed and twisted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he snarled. I met his glare with calm. I told the truth. "You humiliated me in front of the police," he spat. "Do you know what they'll think at my job if this gets out? Do you know how fast a rumor like that spreads?" There it was, the heart of it. Not remorse, not guilt. Fear of losing his reputation. Ethan lived for appearances, and I had just shattered the illusion. "I almost died," I said quietly. "And you locked me in like I was already gone." "That's not humiliation, Ethan, that's attempted murder." For a second he froze, but then his anger roared back. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. "You think anyone will believe your word over mine? You're old, weak. They'll say you're confused. They'll say grief and medication made you imagine things." But his voice was too loud, too desperate. He wasn't convincing me, he was trying to convince himself. I let him rant, the recorder once again hidden in my pocket, capturing every venomous word. He paced like a trapped wolf, flinging his arms as he painted himself as the victim. "I've worked hard my entire life, and what do I have to show for it? A failing career, debts, a wife who's tired of scraping by, and a father who refuses to step aside. You ruined my life by living too long." The words hit me like a whip, yet instead of weakening me, they strengthened my resolve. Every sentence was more evidence, more nails in the coffin of his lies. When he finally stopped to catch his breath, I said softly, "You ruined yourself, Ethan. I didn't force you into debt. I didn't make you bitter. You chose this path." His eyes flickered, rage and shame colliding. He raised a hand as if to strike me, then let it drop, trembling. He realized the danger of that moment. One wrong move, and he'd hand me more proof than I already had. I'll make sure nobody believes you, he said, his voice dropping into a hiss. I'll tell everyone you've lost your mind. By the time I'm done, even your neighbor will doubt you. He slammed the door behind him, the sound vibrating through the walls. I sat in the quiet that followed, the recorder still running. He thought he could erase my voice, but tonight I had captured his truest one, the voice of desperation. So I ask you, if someone tried to destroy your reputation to save their own, would you let them, or would you fight until the last breath? The following evening, I sat in my chair in the living room, waiting. The recorder rested quietly in my shirt pocket, its red light hidden under the fabric, but its purpose sharp as a blade. I knew Ethan's temper would boil over sooner rather than later, and when it did, I'd be ready. Sure enough, the front door slammed just after dusk. Ethan stormed in his tie, loosened his face, flushed with drink or anger, maybe both. Celeste trailed behind him, her eyes darting nervously, a grocery bag clutched to her chest. She avoided my gaze and slipped into the kitchen, leaving Ethan standing before me. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he snapped, pointing a finger in my face. "Calling the cops, humiliating me in my own house. Do you know what they're saying about me at work already? They're whispering like I'm some kind of criminal." I kept my voice even steady, as if speaking to a stranger. "You are a criminal, Ethan. You locked me in while I begged for help. That's not just betrayal, that's a crime." His laugh was sharp and bitter. "Crime? You're lucky I didn't finish the job. Do you know how much easier my life would have been if you'd just died?" The venom in his tone burned, but I held my ground, my heart steady despite the threat. "Say it again," I told him, leaning forward slightly. He sneered, mistaking my calm for weakness. "Fine. You should have died. That heart attack should have taken you. You're nothing but a roadblock keeping me from living the life I deserve. Celeste and I could have sold this place, paid off, debts finally breathed. But no, you keep hanging on like a selfish old man who doesn't know when his time is up." Every word landed on the recorder with chilling clarity. My hands stayed folded in my lap, though inside I felt the fire of vindication. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked softly. "Do you hear what you're saying to your own father?" He jabbed his finger at me again, his face red, his breath hot with rage. "Don't twist this, Dad. You made me this way. All my life you controlled everything, money, decisions, even this house. You never let me be my own man. And now when it's finally my turn, you cling to life like it's some prize only you deserve. Well, I'm done waiting." For a moment, the room went quiet, except for his heavy breathing. In the kitchen doorway, I caught a glimpse of Celeste. Her face pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like shame. She turned away, retreating before Ethan noticed. I sat back, my voice low but firm. "You just sealed your own fate, Ethan. Those words will follow you." His eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. "What do you mean?" But before he could press me, the faint sound of a car idling outside reached my ears. My lips curved in the smallest smile. "Justice," I said simply. "Tell me, if someone confessed their darkest truth in front of you, would you stay silent, or would you make sure the world heard it?" Ethan's tirade hung in the air like smoke after a fire, acrid and heavy. He paced the living room with frantic energy, muttering curses, kicking at the rug, as though the fibers themselves had betrayed him. I remained in my chair, steady and composed, the recorder still catching every word. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Celeste peeking in from the kitchen, her face pale, her lips pressed tight. For years she had called me Papa, sent birthday cards, hugged me with warmth. Now she stood there, frozen between loyalty to her husband and the truth she could no longer ignore. Ethan's voice cracked through the silence. "You think anyone cares about some old man's sob story? You think the cops are going to take your word over mine? I've got a career, a reputation. You've got nothing but a failing heart. I let his words settle, then asked calmly, if that's true, why are you shouting? Why are you afraid? His face reddened, further veins standing out along his temples. Afraid of you, don't make me laugh. The only thing I fear is being stuck here another year, waiting for you to finally do the decent thing and die. Celeste flinched at those words, her hand covering her mouth. She tried to slip away quietly, but I caught her eye. For the first time, I saw not complicity, but guilt. She knew the truth now, and perhaps she had always known it, but Ethan's explosion made it undeniable. You hear that, Celeste? I said, my voice carrying through the room. Your husband doesn't just wish me gone. He's been planning it. Ethan spun toward her, his eyes blazing. Stay out of this, he barked. You don't know what he's doing. He's twisting my words. But Celeste's trembling voice betrayed her. No, Ethan. I heard you. I've heard you for months. All those late-night talks about the house, the money. I told myself you didn't mean it. But tonight, you said it plain. Her words sliced deeper into him than anything I could have said. He lunged toward her, but she stepped back, her face streaked with tears. Don't, she whispered. Don't you dare. I seized the moment, my tone firm but measured. You see, Ethan, the truth has a way of crawling out no matter how hard you try to bury it. You think you're the only one suffering, but the people around you are suffocating under your greed. For a moment, he looked torn between fury and desperation. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his hands balled into fists. You've turned her against me too, he spat. You're poisoning everyone? No, I said, shaking my head slowly. You poisoned yourself. All I did was hold up the mirror. The tension thickened, and in the quiet that followed, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car door shutting outside. Someone else had arrived. Ethan didn't notice, but I did, and I knew this night was far from over. So let me ask you, if you saw someone you once loved unravel, showing their darkest self, would you pity them, or would you let justice take its course? The knock at the door came like thunder, splitting the night. 3 sharp raps, firm and deliberate, echoing through the house. Ethan froze mid-stride, his eyes darting toward the entryway. Celeste gasped softly, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter, as if bracing herself for a storm. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of blue and red lights washing across the street. My heart steadied, not from relief, but from certainty. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Ethan turned back to me, panic flashing across his features. What did you do, old man? His voice cracked with desperation, the bravado draining away. I did what you refused to do, I said evenly. I called for help. Another knock rattled the door. This time a voice followed. Arlington Heights Police. Open up. Ethan cursed under his breath and ran a trembling hand through his hair. If they hear anything, you'll regret it. He straightened his tie, forced a mask of calm over his face, and moved toward the door. I remained seated, the recorder still humming against my chest, capturing every second. Celeste lingered in the hallway, torn between fear of Ethan and the truth she could no longer deny. When Ethan opened the door, Sergeant Gonzalez and Officer Patel stepped inside. Their presence was calm but commanding. Gonzalez's eyes scanned the room, sharp and assessing. Mr. Reynolds, we'd like to speak with you again. We've had follow-up reports that concern us. Ethan laughed nervously, spreading his hands. I told you already, my father's confused. He's old, he misremembers things. You can't take anything he says at face value. But before he could continue, I raised my voice from the chair. Sergeant, I'm not confused. I've been recording every word. The officers turned toward me. Ethan whipped around his face, pale as chalk. "He's lying," he shouted, his voice cracking. "He provoked me. He twisted everything I said." Celeste stepped forward, her voice shaking. "No, he's telling the truth. I've heard it all. Ethan's been talking about the house, the money, about waiting for Oscar to die. Tonight he said it out loud." The room shifted in an instant. Ethan's composure collapsed completely. "You traitor!" he roared at her. But Patel was already stepping between them, his hand resting on his holster. Sergeant Gonzalez's gaze locked on me. "Do you have the recording, Mr. Reynolds?" With slow, deliberate movements, I pulled the silver recorder from my pocket and set it on the table. Every word. From the night he locked me in to this very evening. Ethan lunged forward, but Patel caught his arm, restraining him. His struggles only made him look smaller, weaker, a man cornered by his own cruelty. Gonzalez nodded, once her expression unreadable. "We'll need to hear it. But I think we've already heard enough. So tell me, if you had the chance to watch justice knock on your door, would you open it without fear?" The tension in the living room was thick enough to choke on. Ethan stood pinned in Officer Patel's grip, his face flushed, crimson veins bulging at his neck. Celeste lingered near the kitchen doorway, wringing her hands, her eyes darting between her husband and me. I could see the war raging inside her, loyalty against conscience, fear against truth. Sergeant Gonzalez fixed her gaze on Celeste. "Ma'am, do you have anything to add? What you say now will matter." For a long moment, Celeste's lips trembled without sound. Then finally her shoulders slumped. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." She stepped forward, her voice cracking but clear. "Oscar is telling the truth. Ethan talked about the house for months, how much it was worth, how life would be easier once his father was gone. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he was venting. But tonight, I heard him say it. He said Oscar should have died." The words fell like stones in the silence. Ethan's eyes went wide, betrayal flashing across his face. "Celeste, how dare you?" He thrashed against Patel's grip, but the officer tightened his hold, unmoved by the outburst. "You think throwing me under the bus will save you?" Ethan spat. "You've benefited from this too. You wanted the money as much as I did." Celeste shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "No, Ethan. I wanted a life with you, not this madness, not murder." Her words cracked something inside him. His body sagged slightly, but his mouth kept working, frantic. "She's lying. They're both lying. Can't you see? This is some pathetic old man trying to ruin my life because he can't stand letting go of control." But the harder he fought, the weaker he looked. The mask of the dutiful son had dissolved completely, leaving nothing but desperation. Sergeant Gonzalez's voice cut through his shouting, calm and steady. "Mr. Reynolds, we already have your confession recorded. And now we have your wife's corroboration. Continuing to argue won't change the evidence." Ethan stilled his eyes, darting between the officers, Celeste and me. For a brief second, he looked like a cornered animal realizing escape was impossible. Then his expression hardened, and he hissed at me. "You think you've won, you've destroyed this family." I met his glare without flinching. "No, Ethan. You destroyed it yourself the moment you chose greed over blood." Celeste sobbed quietly into her hands. The officers exchanged a glance, and Patel began guiding Ethan toward the door. The house echoed with the sound of his shoes dragging across the hardwood floor. For years, this home had carried the weight of birthdays, Christmas mornings, laughter, and tears. Now it bore witness to a different sound, the sound of justice removing its poison. I sat back in my chair, exhausted but steady. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't fighting for breath. I was breathing freely, watching my son's downfall unfold, not through anger or violence, but through truth. So tell me, if your own child turned against you, would you forgive them, or would you let the world see them for who they really are? The night after Ethan was escorted away, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the house breathe. The silence was no longer suffocating, it was liberating. For the first time in weeks, I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel without fear that each second might be my last. Yet beneath that peace was a sobering truth. My son, my only child, was facing charges that would stain his name forever. The following morning, Sergeant Gonzalez returned with a copy of her report. She laid it on the coffee table with a firmness that told me the case was moving forward. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, "based on the evidence you're recording, your testimony, and your daughter-in-law's statement, we're recommending charges of elder abuse and false imprisonment. A prosecutor will be in touch." Her words settled into me with a weight both heavy and relieving. Justice was coming, but justice had a price. My son would not only be seen for what he was, he would be marked for it. When she left, I walked through the house, slowly touching the furniture, the photographs, the walls I had built with my own hands. Memories clung to every corner: Christmas mornings, with Ethan tearing through wrapping paper, Sarah's laughter in the kitchen, the smell of fresh paint when we first moved in. It was a home meant for family. And yet, in the end, it had revealed just how fragile family could be. By noon, Celeste came downstairs with a suitcase in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow from a night without sleep. "Oscar," she said softly, "I'll be gone by tonight. Divorce papers will follow." I studied her for a moment. Once she had felt like a daughter to me. But now she looked like someone who had realized she'd been standing on a sinking ship. "That's probably best," I told her. Tears welled in her eyes. I should have stopped him. I knew what he was planning, and I stayed silent. "I'm sorry." There was no anger left in me, for her only pity. "We all make choices," I said. "Yours just came too late." After she left, I sat at my desk and opened a blank page in my will. My lawyer, Margaret, had already prepared the paperwork, but I wanted to put my thoughts down in my own hand. Ethan's name would no longer be written among my heirs. The house, the savings, everything would be redirected to charity, to causes that would protect people like me from families like mine. As the pen scratched across the paper, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not the tightness of pain, but the release of a burden. My legacy would not be measured by what I left to a greedy son, but by what I did to protect others from the same fate. So tell me, if your child betrayed you beyond forgiveness, would you still leave them your legacy, or would you choose to leave something greater behind? The news of Ethan's arrest spread faster than I expected. By the end of the week, whispers traveled through our quiet Arlington Heights neighborhood. Neighbors who once waved politely at Ethan now avoided his eye. The story had already reached his workplace, too. I knew this because Margaret, my lawyer, told me she had received a call from one of her contacts. "Your son's name is Mudd. They say he's under investigation for elder abuse. No company wants that liability." It was strange. He had feared humiliation more than justice, and now humiliation was exactly what justice had delivered. The first court appearance was brief, a preliminary hearing to confirm charges. I walked into the courthouse with steady steps, my cane tapping against the polished floor. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his once proud shoulders hunched. The man who used to tower over me with smug confidence now avoided my eyes, fiddling with his tie as though straightening it might repair his image. The prosecutor laid out the case with methodical precision: my testimony, the paramedics' report of being delayed entry, Celeste's statement, and most damning of all, the recording. When Ethan's own words played through the speakers, a hush fell over the courtroom. "You should have gone last time. It would have been easier for everyone." Maybe I'll make sure you don't keep holding us back." Each syllable echoed off the marble walls, turning heads, sinking his reputation further. His lawyer tried to argue stress, frustration, and a moment of poor judgment, but the damage was done. Even the judge's expression tightened at the coldness of the words. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply sat there, hands folded, letting the truth stand on its own. For the first time, Ethan had to face a world where his lies couldn't shield him. Afterward, Celeste caught me in the hallway. She looked smaller than I remembered, carrying herself with the fragility of someone whose world had collapsed. I testified, she said, her voice thin. I told them everything. Maybe it won't undo what I allowed, but it's the least I can do now. I nodded. It takes courage to admit the truth, even late. She wiped her eyes. I filed for divorce. I won't stand beside him anymore. I believed her, and though forgiveness was impossible, I felt a strange relief knowing she had stepped away from his darkness. Back at home, I sat by the window and watched the children on the street ride their bikes, carefree and laughing. I thought of Ethan as a boy, pedaling wobbly down this same street, turning back to me with a wide grin. "Did you see Dad? Did you see me do it?" That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who had traded innocence for greed, love for resentment, and now he was reaping the cost of those choices. So tell me, if justice came at the price of your child's downfall, would you call it a tragedy or the only fair ending left? The morning after the hearing, I met Margaret, my lawyer, in her office. She was a sharp woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled neatly into a bun and glasses perched low on her nose. She'd handled my affairs for years through Sarah's passing and the first draft of my will. But today her expression was different, harder, more protective. "Oscar," she said, sliding a stack of documents across the desk, "I've prepared the new will as we discussed. Ethan is officially disinherited. He cannot contest it without incriminating himself further." I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of the decision. Cutting your only child out of your legacy is not a simple stroke of ink, it is a severing of blood ties. Still, I thought of those words. Maybe it would be for the best. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from pain, it was from clarity. I signed each page, carefully pressing my name into history. Margaret's eyes softened. "You've done the right thing. Your estate will go toward the Elder Abuse Prevention Society and the assisted living community you've chosen. Your money will protect others, not destroy them." When I left her office, I felt lighter, as if a stone I'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. The house that Ethan saw as a prize would no longer be his. Instead, it would become a shield for strangers, people like me, who had trusted family only to be betrayed. That afternoon, I began boxing up Ethan's belongings. His suits, his books, his framed certificates, all carefully packed and labeled. I wasn't throwing them out. I was giving him the courtesy he had denied me. He could collect them when the time came, but they would no longer pollute the walls of my home. As I taped the last box shut, I glanced at Sarah's photograph on the mantel. "You'd understand," I whispered. "You always said love meant protection. Protecting Ethan would have meant enabling him. Protecting others means telling the truth." The house felt strangely alive again, freed from the poison that had filled it. Neighbors began stopping by, not with judgment, but with support. Hal brought over coffee one morning, placing the steaming mug in my hand. "You did what had to be done, Oscar. None of us blame you." I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. It reminded me that family isn't always blood. It's those who stand beside you when the storm comes. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat in my chair and stared at the will resting on the desk. For decades, I had thought my legacy would be measured by what I left my son. Now I realized it was measured by what I chose to protect. So let me ask you, would you leave your inheritance to someone who betrayed you, or would you cut them out forever, no matter how much it hurt? The for sale sign went up on the front lawn one bright morning, its white post gleaming in the sunlight. For 37 years, this house had been my sanctuary, my battlefield, and nearly my tomb. Watching that sign sway gently in the breeze was bittersweet, but it was also a declaration this chapter was over. The realtor, a cheerful woman with an efficient air, walked me through the process. 3 bedrooms, good neighborhood, recently updated kitchen. "This will go quickly, Mr. Reynolds," she said confidently. I nodded, though my thoughts weren't on square footage or resale value. My thoughts were on freedom. As the days passed, prospective buyers came and went, wandering through the halls as if measuring the weight of their own futures. Some admired the crown molding Sarah had insisted on. Others marveled at the garden I had once tended with Ethan when he was still small enough to carry a watering can with both hands. Those memories clung to the house like wallpaper, impossible for strangers to see, but inescapable for me. Packing was harder. Every drawer opened was a reminder, every closet a doorway to another life. Sarah's favorite teacups, Ethan's old baseball glove, the quilt we'd bought at a county fair, it all carried stories. I chose carefully what to keep, what to donate, and what to finally let go. Each box sealed was another step toward closing a door I never thought I'd walk through. Hal stopped by, often, sometimes bringing his wife's pot roast, sometimes just his steady company. One evening, he stood with me on the porch as we watched a young couple tour the property. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" he said quietly. "Strange, yes," I admitted. "But also right. This house stopped being mine the moment Ethan locked that door. I'd rather it belonged to someone who sees it as a home, not a prize." He clapped a hand on my shoulder, firm and reassuring. "You're starting over, Oscar. Not everyone gets that chance." When the offer came above asking price, I signed without hesitation. I didn't need the money, I needed the closure. The proceeds would fund my new life at the assisted living community, a place filled with light gardens, and people who understood that growing old didn't mean growing useless. And part of it would go to charity, ensuring Ethan's betrayal would become someone else's protection. On my last night in the house, I walked from room to room one final time. The empty walls echoed with footsteps, but I wasn't haunted. I was relieved. I paused by the window where I had once called desperately for help, where Hal had seen me and saved my life. This time I looked out with gratitude, not desperation. As I locked the door for the last time, I whispered into the quiet, "Goodbye, Sarah. Thank you for giving me the strength to finish this. So tell me, if the place that once held your happiest memories became the stage of your deepest betrayal, would you stay, or would you walk away to start again?" The moving truck pulled away, leaving me with nothing but a suitcase and a fresh set of keys. My new home wasn't a grand estate or a family house filled with echoes of laughter and arguments. It was a modest apartment at the assisted living community on the edge of town. Yet as I stepped inside, the first thing I felt wasn't loss. It was peace. The space was bright, with large windows that overlooked a courtyard, where residents gathered to drink coffee or play cards. There was a garden out back, and I could already hear the sound of someone strumming a guitar on the patio. Life flowed here, steady and calm, not poisoned by greed or resentment. I unpacked, slowly placing Sarah's photograph on the nightstand first. Her smile lit up the plain white walls, transforming the space into something that felt like mine. The quilt we'd bought years ago at the county fair went across the bed, a reminder that love had once been real in my life. And just like that, the room felt warm. Within hours, neighbors stopped by to welcome me. A retired school teacher named Jack invited me to Thursday poker nights. A woman named Ruth Sharp as a whip at 82 brought homemade cookies and told me about the choir she organized every Sunday. They treated me not as a burden, but as a man with stories worth hearing. Hal visited later that week carrying a thermos of coffee. He sat across from me at the little table by the window. "Place suits you," he said, scanning the cheerful bustle outside. "It does," I admitted. "Feels like I've traded a prison for a sanctuary." He nodded, his weathered hands wrapped around the mug. "You survived, Oscar. More than that, you fought back. Not everyone could have." I thought of Ethan, of the courtroom, of the look on his face when his own words condemned him. He wasn't just disinherited from my estate. He was disinherited from my heart. Yet instead of sorrow, I felt resolve. His downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was choosing to live on my terms, free of chains I didn't deserve. The days turned into a new rhythm. Morning walks in the garden replaced pacing hallways filled with dread. Evening card games replaced the silence of a house where I once fought for breath. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Not because I had to be, but because I wanted to be. One afternoon, a cardinal landed on my windowsill, its feathers glowing red in the sunlight. Sarah always said cardinals were messengers from those we've lost. I smiled, choosing to believe it was her telling me she was proud. At 68, I wasn't finished. I was free. And freedom, I realized, isn't about where you live. It's about who you refuse to let control your story. So tell me, if you survived betrayal and reclaimed your dignity, would you call it an ending or the beginning of the life you truly deserved? Looking back now, I understand that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the very people you raise, the ones you sacrifice everything for. My son tried to erase me for the promise of money, but what he truly erased was himself from my heart, from my legacy, from the meaning of family. That wound will never fully heal, but it taught me something important. Dignity is worth more than inheritance, and justice is worth more than blood ties. For anyone listening, if you are a parent, think carefully about how you treat your children. And if you are a child, never forget the hands that carried you through your weakest years. Greed can destroy a family faster than poverty ever could. I am not telling this story to dwell in bitterness. I am telling it so others can see the cost of selfishness and the strength it takes to stand against it. Have you ever faced a betrayal in your own family that forced you to make painful choices? How did you respond, and what lesson did you take from it? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. Remember, love should protect, not consume. Justice is never too late. Thank you for listening.